Welcome to this Build with Uma learning session, everyone. We've got Lee here, Pump Lunch, and he works for RIS Labs, and he's going to take us through how to become a dev. Before we get into the demo, I've got a few questions. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get involved with Uma?
Yeah, I was a civil engineer by study and trade for a bunch of years, but just got super interested in this space, and my curiosity just overtook me, I guess. And so I started learning to code in my spare time. And I don't I always kind of thought about learning to code, but honestly, until I got interested in like the Ethereum space and smart contracts, I just didn't have enough like impetus to actually try and do it. So then I started learning to code. I did a JavaScript course, and then I did like an Ethereum developer course, and then I did a boot camp, which was good. It's actually a company that got bought out and became Alchemy University. Um, and so that was also really helpful. And what I really found helpful there was like there was a cohort program, so I met peers kind of in the same spot as me, like super interested in the space, trying to break into it, learn to code, don't really know anyone in the space or people that are interested in this. So that was really helpful too. Um, and from there, I started doing like hackathons, some in person, some online, which was great. Great practice, great exposure to like the industry. That's where at ETH New York, I met the people at the UMA booth. A handful of folks like Hart, Sean used to be there, and Melissa was there. So I met them there, and then I over the next year I continued to do like hackathons, and I did some contract like grant work with some of my the people I met in the boot camp as well. So those connections and having people to work with and learn together was really valuable. And then I did well on an online hackathon with Uma, and that turned they gave me a grant to continue building out the product, which was a really good learning experience to build something like to I'll say
Decentralist,
production,
right?
yeah, decentralized. So to build it to like a production level, or at least the MVP production level. Um, and put it out there. I did the front end, the smart contracts. I put together the docs and all kinds of stuff. So that was a really good experience. And then eventually came on with Uma as an ambassador, and then full time now. So now I'm working as like an integrations engineer. So I mostly work with like external parties, like lots of DAOs that are integrating one of Uma's products. So whether that's like they're integrating directly with the optimistic Oracle, or they're adopting OSNAP, and now Oval as well. So I don't spend a ton of time actually in a code editor because I'm not on the engineering side, but definitely like all the stuff I learned is important because I'm providing like technical support and looking through other integrations code base from time to time and stuff like that. Um, yeah.
What languages do you think are the best to know before you get into Web3? Or
Um,
can it be any?
you know, I don't know a lot of general languages. I learned JavaScript. That was what I heard was recommended. I know lots of other people
What about
learn like,
Python? Did you
yeah, I've heard Python. Um, I don't think I have a good I have a wide enough like knowledge of the different languages to really comment. I know um like Solidity is looks a lot like um JavaScript. So that was, I think, why it was recommended. And I mean, it's also used on like lots of front end code as well. Um, and I think it's easy enough to learn. So I was happy with that. I think, I don't know, I've seen people have different approaches to self learning. Um, and some people take a really like foundational approach and try and take it like slow and methodical, and they're like, okay, they're going to learn JavaScript, and then they're going to learn HTML, and then CSS, and then so they spend months and months before they even like do anything related to Ethereum. They do like general courses for those languages. That method wasn't going to work for me. I was just like really interested in Ethereum, so I think I just needed to get like to a proficient level on JavaScript, and like um and then I got into like smart contracts. I just found it so interesting. And I that's kind of how I like to try and learn, is just to like follow what I'm interested in as much as I can. Um and so I've also heard some other people, and this resonates with me, that like learn like a general language. And I mean, the thing about coding, from my experience, is like it's always learning. You're always learning something new, and there's always something new to learn. And so it's like um, having a learning any language will help you with another language. Like there's a million different languages, and once you learn how to think through code and learn how to like debug errors, um, any like it doesn't matter so much what languages you know. Of course, it's helpful, but I would say get proficient with like a more general language like JavaScript or maybe Python, um, and then I would dive into exactly what you want to do. If you know you want to like code smart contracts, then I would start learning Solidity, or which is probably the easiest smart contract language to get into. But um, yeah, and I the other thing is like kind of that foundational approach some people might take, where it's like they spend a long time on HTML or CSS or JavaScript, and then they go on to what maybe they're more interested in. Um, I'd like it better, yeah, like I said, following my curiosity. And when I was learning Solidity, there's lots of stuff I didn't know, so you have to like step back sometimes and maybe go back and like brush up on some coding basics. But I kind of like that, where you're like zooming in and zooming back out on things, and I find that more helpful than like kind of a step-by-step foundational approach. Um, yeah, but I
That's
mean,
awesome.
everyone learns different too, and I think another thing I realized is like when you're self-learning, there's a ton of content out there, and you can spend a lot of time just trying to think of what course I should do next, and like curating your own curriculum, kind of, right? But you just have to like you have to decide on something. And so that's kind of what's handy about courses and stuff like that, I think, is like sometimes the content isn't really any better than what you can find online. But it's helpful that it's curated and you don't have to like think about that, and you can just learn. Um, and so that's really helpful. And the other thing I think is when you're self-learning, you can get in the habit of just like, oh, I'm not like a real dev. I'm just like, and you're kind of intimidated, and you just learn on your own, and you just do courses, and that's kind of like this safe little space where you're not pushing yourself. But when you like actually try and code with others, you can learn a lot from other people, and you're actually like learning how to communicate and coordinate repos and stuff like that. And so I think that's like really key, because in the real world, that's how most people do development. I mean, I guess if you're like a independent researcher, auditor, or something, you can like kind of live in your own little silo. But I found it was important to like work with others, and then you get opportunities through that, or like go to hackathons, which is like kind of intimidating as well. 'Cause you're like, oh, I'm not a real dev, whatever. But it's like you have to step out of your comfort zone and push yourself, and you can't just um, for me, I think sometimes I see people get stuck just doing courses online on their own, and you can just do courses forever, feeling like you're not good enough yet to do something.
Sure, that's good. Shall we dive in then?
Yeah.
In before you get into the coding and how you're going to do this, if I wanted to set up the environment to build, what would I need? No, what do we need to install initially?
So I'm gonna be cloning. Like Uma has a dev quick start repo, and so
So
it
firstly, we need to have a GitHub account, I guess, right?
um yeah, you need to have Git installed on your terminal. I don't think you would actually need an account to clone it. If you want to like
But I'm
um
guessing it's a useful thing to have
no,
your
I
own.
think for sure anytime people share their code they're going to be using GitHub. So I think a GitHub account is great. Um yeah, I'm using a Windows machine, but I use Ubuntu WSL, so it's like a Windows subsystem for Linux. So it creates like a Linux-like environment on your Windows machine, and that's required for some packages. And that is the dev quick start repo is like a smart contract repo using the Foundry. Like
And what's
it's a smart
Foundry?
it's a smart contract tool chain. So it's kind of like a developer, like a smart contract dev environment, and it requires that you need to use like Linux or like WSL for Windows or an Apple machine. So um, that is actually kind of tricky to get WSL. There's lots of good guides online, and I have some notes from some of the videos I made here. Um, and so there's directions in here on installing WSL if people are interested.
Sure.
I
We
just
will
linked to
upload
it here.
this. Sorry, we will upload this to YouTube as well. And we'll put a link to this video as well. I've looked at it.
Yeah,
I've watched it. It's pretty good. That's why I wanted to do this session with you.
yeah. Um, yeah, so this the dev quick start repo, basically it has example, like it's a Foundry repo all set up with the dependencies you need to build an integration with Uma, and it has example smart contracts of different types of integration. So it has like an insurance smart contract or like a prediction market smart contract, and these are um, built to use the optimistic oracle. So that's what I'm gonna use today because it's just a quick and easy way to get started building with the optimistic oracle. Um, yeah, so I'll jump in and open my terminal. Oh, so I'm in my Ubuntu WSL terminal, which gives me like a Linux-like environment on Windows. And I'm just gonna flip to my notes here. And so installing Foundry, um, you can download Foundry with this command. And then Foundry up is a command to either install Foundry or update to the latest version. So I'll run that. I already have it downloaded, so it's going to update to the latest version. And then I will run git clone. So I already have git installed on my terminal. You can Google how to install that. I don't have the notes here on that, but git clone and then just the URL for this repo. So I have it in the notes here, but it'd just be this URL here for the root of this dev quick start repo.
Is there a form of the notes that you can provide me so I can put it
Yeah,
along with the YouTube so we
yeah.
we can have the
So
notes where people can just go.
yeah, in that video, I linked to a gist file, and that's the notes that I'm working off of. So it has has the env that I use for that video, but then it also has all the CLI commands.
Excellent. We'll make a link to this as well.
Yeah. So then when you run git clone with that, it's gonna copy down that repo down to your local drive. So I've already done that, so it's not actually gonna download because I already have a folder of that name, but I'll just use that one. So once you've cloned the repo to your local, you can change into that folder. So CD is to change directories, and then I'm just putting in the dev quick start. And one cool handy trick, I always like when people gave their little quick tips. If you start typing in a folder and then hit tab, it'll autofill in the rest. And so now I'm in the folder, and I can run code period, and that'll open up my code editor. And so I'm using VS Code, which is a pretty like standard code editor. And so this is the repo I have. And so I'll just kind of run through.
Just before
Just kind
you
of,
go on, so you've got VS Code installed. Do you have any special extensions that you've added to VS Code to make it life easier?
yeah, I'm not too complicated with extensions. I'm sure there's a lot more. I do have the Solidity by Juan Blanco installed, so that's just like um, gives you errors on your different Solidity files. And then there's a few that I set up when I installed WSL that are explained in that WSL install link. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I'll just switch to using a terminal in my code editor now. So now I have a terminal in the dev quick start repo on my local file here. And the first thing you'll want to do is forge install. So when the repo comes in, I can kind of run through it here. All the dependencies will be in the lib folder. So basically, dependencies are different like references to other code repos. So I don't want to like copy and paste the optimistic Oracle smart contract into my repo. Rather, I want to add it as a dependency. And so in Foundry, typically they use a lib or like library folder, right? And so all the UMA smart contracts are under this protocol name. And then we have like Open Zeppelin contracts for like ERC20 contracts here. And then there's some like Forge contracts here, which Foundry has like 4 different components to it. There's Forge, Cast, and Anvil. We'll just use Forge and Cast today, and so I don't want to dive into all of that. But these are the dependencies that are already set up with a dev quick start repo. And when you run Forge install, it'll actually install them all. So when you first clone the repo, it's just going to have lib and then say protocol, but none of the information within protocol is going to be included. But when you run Forge install, it'll actually install all the dependencies that are set up in that repo. And then the other thing I've done to get set up is I've created a .env file with some of the like the environmental variables that I'll need. So
can you just explain a little bit about the .env? What's
yeah, so typically people use it for like constant values that they'll use within their code or like sensitive information. So
this is where you're going to give us your private key, your
this is
ETH
where
wallet.
you'll see the private key. So yeah, I've I have a real.env file, which is already filled in, which I won't click on. And then I
Please
have this
don't.
.env copy file, just as an example. And so I've pasted in my private key because I'm planning on deploying my contract to Goerli. And so I need a private key to sign that transaction and send it to the Goerli blockchain. And then I also have an RPC URL, which the RPC URL, I got mine from Alchemy. You have to create an account there, but I'm just using like a free RPC. It's not a paid one. And basically that RPC is the your access to the blockchain. So if you want to read info from the blockchain in your code or send a transaction to the blockchain in your code, you'll need an RPC. And then I have an Etherscan API key. And so when I deploy a new contract, I want to verify it so that on Etherscan, the contract will show up as verified. So you can see what the code is and you can actually interact with your contract on Etherscan. So if you create an account on Etherscan, you can get an API key. And I, again, have a free version. And then I just have this to demonstrate how to load the env variables into your command line.
So there's quite a number of things that you need to set up prior
Yep.
to get this working.
Yeah, usually like you can have one .env file that you can like copy around your different repos.
Yeah.
The
What I
very,
mean is you
very,
need an Alchemy or Infura is the other one that you could use, right, for
yeah,
RPC provider. So if you've
yeah,
got a MetaMask wallet, you can export your private key from there to use it. And then you need
yes,
to go and get an Etherscan API key as well. Um,
yeah, yep. Um, the other very key thing that we need to highlight with the .env file, so if you have your private key in the .env file, like I've done, and then you push this repo onto GitHub, and it's a public repo, the .env file will go up there, and your private key will go up there, and there's bots that search public repos on GitHub for private keys, and if you have any funds on that wallet, they'll drain them because the private key is pushed onto a public web page, right?
yeah.
So to prevent that from happening, you have to make sure in the git ignore you include .env. And so what that's going to do
Isn't
is
that there by default, or you have to actually physically go in and do that?
some repos
Or
will
you
have
should
it,
check it.
some won't, but you should always check. So you
Right.
should, as soon as you use a .env file, you should right away go to the git ignore file and make sure .env is included. And then also when you do git commits, also double check then that you're not committing your .env file. Have to be really careful about that. Okay, so I think that's like all the setup we need to start coding. And so yesterday I edited the data asserter contract. So this is a contract that is in the dev quick start repo already. So it's like an example contract our engineers made. And so it's kind of like an example people can use to, it's a pretty generic example where people can assert data onto their smart contract and it'll show whether that data has been verified by the Oracle as true or false. And so I just edited that to make a bit more simple contract. And what it's going to basically assert that X person is the leader of Y country. So, Biden is the leader of the USA and Trudeau is the leader of Canada. And then the contract will store on chain the current leaders of these countries. And so I don't know, Neon, what do you think? Should I do a quick run through of the smart contract, or should I just like deploy it to Goerli and
could
show it
you,
on Etherscan,
as,
create an assertion on the Oracle
as
UI.
this is like a 101 kind of thing, just very briefly go through it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, like I said, this is basically a copy of the data asserter contract. And so um, this is the version of Solidity we're using. You always need a pragma Solidity at first, and then these are the contracts we're importing. So from our dependencies that I was talking about earlier, we're going to import like the optimistic Oracle v3 interface, and so that's going to allow us to like call functions from the OOV3 within our code, so that we can interact with it. And then our contract starts here, and we're declaring state variables in our contract here. So we're going to have one for like the default currency used for like bonding for assertions to the Oracle. We're going to store the Oracle address under this variable, the OO. We have like a constant variable for the liveness period we want to use for any assertion to the Oracle. And then on these mappings, this is where I'm actually going to store the data of
Sorry, for the
countries and leaders.
assertion liveness, one does the 120 signify?
120 seconds. So I have it set to 2
So it's in
minutes.
seconds, right?
Yeah, yeah, seconds. Um, yeah, and then I have a struct, which is kind of like a template for an object in JavaScript, I guess, which is just going to store a country and a leader. And so when I make an assertion to the Oracle that, you know, that I am the leader of the USA, say, I'm going to store the identifier that the Oracle gives back to me, which is a bytes value, and I'm going to associate that to the country and leader that I'm asserting. So this is where assertions are going to be stored on my contract, and then I'm have a separate mapping where I'm going to store, say, a string of USA and then the actual leader of that country. So the first string is going to be the country, and the second string is going to be the leader. And this is only going to store verified information. So smart contracts, the constructor runs. This is basically a function that runs once only, and that runs when the contract is created. So when this contract is created, I'm going to pass in a current default currency address and the address of the Oracle, and it's going to store those in the variables we talked about up there. And then for assert country leader, this is the function that I'll call to make a new assertion that X leader is the, or X person is the leader of country Y. And so what it's going to do is it's going to make an assertion to the Oracle, and the Oracle is going to give back the assertion ID. So the function call is here to the Oracle, and it's going to return the assertion ID. And then in my assertions mapping, under that assertion ID that's returned from the Oracle, I'm going to store what was asserted. And so that'll be the flow to make a new assertion. And then when the Oracle resolves that assertion as either true or false, it will call this function within my contract. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check that, okay, I'm going to check that the message sender, so the address that's calling into my contract is the address of the optimistic Oracle, because I don't want anyone else to be able to call into this function. So I'm going to require that here. And then if the Oracle says that that assertion was true, I'm going to store that country and and leader on my smart contract. So if my assertion that Biden is the leader of the USA was true, the oracle will return true, and I'll store that on my smart contract that Biden is the leader of the USA. And if I make an assertion that Elvis is the leader of the USA, the oracle resolve that false, and that won't be stored on our smart contract.
Right, awesome.
Yeah. So
Shall we
that's,
deploy it then?
yeah, let's go to the deployment. So I'm going to, actually, I'm just going to go into the Foundry docs. So these are the Foundry docs where you can actually find the commands to create, to deploy contracts. And I'm just going to grab one of the examples, I think, in the interest of time. So I'll flip over back here. Okay, so the command we're running is forge create, and that's going to create a new contract. And then there's a bunch of options you have to put in here. So actually, I forgot one thing before we do this. My .env variables, they're not going to be accessible to me in my terminal right away. And so one way you can test if your .env variables are accessible is you can run echo, which is a command that's just going to return the value of whatever you put after it. And so your env variables, you always have to have a $ ahead of them. But I'm going to use this env test variable. And so I return it. So it's, you'd see the returned value of env test here. So you can see it's blank, so that the env test variable is not loaded into my terminal. So I'm going to run source.env, and that's going to load all the environmental variables saved in my real.env file into my terminal. And so now if I run echo env test, and you can just hit up and down to access previous commands from your terminal. So if I run echo env test, I can see that it's loaded. And so now I know that my other variables are also accessible to me on the terminal.
Right, okay.
So I'm going to go back to that forge create command. So forge create is going to deploy a new contract. All these, the dash dash whatever, these are all different options that you can set. So I'm going to use my my RPC URL. So this is going to be my RPC URL from my .env file. I'm also putting in my private key so that I can sign and send this transaction. And I also have my Etherscan API key and the verify option here, which is just running off the screen. And that's, so then when I deploy this contract, it's going to verify it on Etherscan right away. And then I also have my constructor args. So these are the arguments that are going to go into the constructor function. So if I flip back to my smart contract, I need an address for the default currency and an address for the optimistic oracle. And so I have two addresses here. I have one here and then a second one here. And I can quick just show you where to find those. So if you go to the UMA docs, we have a page for network information. And so I just click on Goerli because that's the chain I'm using right now. And then there's Oracle v3. So this is the address of the Oracle on Goerli. So that's the address I've pasted in here.
Is that in our notes as well? How to do that? Or can we add
Um,
it?
no, that'd be a good thing to add. But yeah, it's just from the docs that it links to.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then for the default, I'll show you on Etherscan. So I'm on Gorley Etherscan right now, and if I paste in that OOV3 address, you'll see it's verified, so you can see all the code in it, which is really handy. And you can also um, read values from it, and you can also actually send transactions on the right contract. So under read, I just grab the default currency here, and so this is the address that I'm using
Right.
um, in my constructor.
Just a side note,
Mhm.
Girly is going to be deprecated,
Yes.
and so what are we going to use instead? Holsky or Sepolia?
I think Sepolia is going to be what Uma is going to be deploying to next. So that's in our engineers backlog to deploy to Sepolia. Um, okay, so when I run Forge Create, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to compile all the smart contracts in this repo. Because before any you do any transactions based on the smart contracts or deploy them, the contracts have to be compiled. And so when I run that, I'm getting an error right now, getting my first error. There's an import that can't be resolved. And that is in test insurance. Okay, so there's a bunch of tests that come in this repo that I'm not using, so I'm just going to delete them all. And then that'll clear up that issue. And rather than running Forge Create, which automatically builds, I'll just can run Forge Build, and that'll compile all the files. And so now I can see that, okay, all the files compiled correctly. So now I'm going to go back to my Forge Create command, which is going to deploy my contract, and I'll run that. Goerli can be a little bit slow sometimes now. Okay, so it deployed my contract to this address, which is good. It didn't verify it on Goerli. It says it failed to deserialize content. Expected value at line 1, column 1. So invalid API key.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to Etherscan and I'm going to paste in that address, which should be my new contract. Yeah, but you can see it's not verified, so I can't see the code on it, and I can't interact with it on Etherscan. Let me quick check my env variables here off screen.
Yeah,
You're seeing Etherscan right now, right?
that's right. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
GR is saying API key was missing in your ENV? Question mark.
Uh, it wasn't in my. Well, I was just showing you guys the copy of my .env file because I don't want to expose my private key, but it is filled in my actual .env file. Let me check
Is
the
it is it
command I'm
is it
running.
correct?
Oh, see, the problem is Etherscan API key. This variable doesn't have a $sign in front of it. So you need, when you use your .env variables in your command line, you need a $sign in front of them. So I'll just deploy it again. It'll be an easy way to.
When you redeploy, it's creating a new contract address, right?
Yes, so I'm creating a new contract right now. Just because it's on Goerli, it's,
Yeah.
the gas is free if you have Goerli ETH. Okay, so it redeployed to this address here, and it's working on the verification right now. So this is my new contract that I just deployed, and it should be verified soon.
Okay, taking on. Is there a difference between the API key for each chain? For example, an
No,
Arbitrum. This is a question
But
again from
for
GR.
different, I would say there's different API keys for different block explorers. But if you're using Etherscan, which has, ETH mainnet and Goerli and a bunch of other chains, so it's these 5 chains, you could use the same API key. But if you're using like Polygon Scan, that's a different block explorer, so you'd need an API key from them.
How about for Arbitrum, you would need for their own Arbitrum
Yeah,
scan thing. Okay.
yeah, I think you would need a different API key then. Okay, and so now my contract that I just deployed is verified, so I can see the code that is in the smart contract, and I can also um, get information from the smart contract. So I can see that default currency address that I put in to as a constructor arg, that's on chain now. I can read that. And I can also write to the contract. So I can assert a country leader. So I'll do Biden as the leader of the USA. And I can connect my MetaMask, which is going to switch me to Goerli, which is good. And then I will hit write.
So what are you doing exactly? What's happening now?
Yeah, so that contract, the function to assert a country leader is called assert country leader. And so this contract takes in a country and a leader. And what the function is going to do is it's going to store that information temporarily on our smart contract and make an assertion to the Oracle that this leader is in fact the leader of the country.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, so what I'm asserting here is that Biden is the leader of the USA. And what my smart, can just do that through Etherscan. And so I will confirm that transaction. And so what that transaction, again, is going to do is going to temporarily store that information on our smart contract and then assert it to the Oracle. And so once that transaction has gone through, just confirmed, we can go to testnet.oracle, which is the Oracle UI for testnets. And now we can see this assertion to the Oracle. So we can see that it's saying Biden is the current leader of the USA, and the challenge period has another minute and a half for someone to dispute it.
Better be quick.
Yeah, it's just for testing purposes. Obviously, you'd need that to be longer and for a real assertion. And the other thing is on testnets, you can make a bond of 0. So there's 0 bond here, which obviously isn't secure. The security of the Oracle verifications comes from like people being economically incentivized to dispute to take your bond, right? But yeah, so now you can see we've made an assertion to the Oracle. When this minute is up, we'll be able to settle it, and then on our contract, we'll be able to see that the contract will have stored that Biden is the leader of the USA, and you know that that's verified by the Oracle.
For a real project, what kind of minimum amount of time would you want the challenge period, the bare minimum?
Yeah, I think in practice right now, the smallest challenge period that integrations have is 2 hours. It depends a lot on the information. Like some integrations, they need the information very quickly, right? Like say across, they want to verify that information quickly so that people can get repaid, right? Relayers are out money until an across assertion is verified and paid out. Where some DAOs, like if they want to execute their governance proposal, like they don't really care if it takes 2 or 3 days, right? And the longer the period, the more time to verify the information. So it means it's a more secure assertion if it has a longer assertion period, right? And And it also depends on how hard the fact is to verify. Like, is Biden the current leader of USA? Takes, 1 minute to verify or less. Where some information for some more complicated integrations, like it takes longer for people to verify that, right? So then you'd want a longer challenge period. Okay, so now challenge period has ended there. So I'm just going to find that assertion now on the Oracle UI. So here it is. Biden is the current leader of the USA. The challenge period has ended. And so I'm able to settle this on the Oracle. So
And this is a
after
manual process, right? So someone has to come in.
on test nets it is. On main nets, our team runs bots that does this. But on test nets you have to actually do this yourself.
All right. So on the main net, you would not need to do this
Right.
extra step.
Right. And so this is gonna, on the Oracle, it's gonna settle that this was not disputed within the challenge period, so it is true. And it's also going to call that callback function in my smart contract, which is here the assertion resolved callback. And since it's going to be asserted as true, my smart contract is going to store that information, right? Okay, so now that transaction's gone through and this has been settled. And so on the Oracle UI, you can see it on settled. Biden is the current leader of the USA. And so now if I go back to my country leaders smart contract, I can read on get leader that if I put in, okay, I want to know the leader of the USA, I put that in and it returns Biden.
Excellent.
And so now this is verified information on chain, right?
Yeah. Gia has a question.
Yes.
If the assertion state changes during the window, what happens?
So assertions, um, when you're looking to dispute an assertion or you're voting to resolve a dispute, you are supposed to review the assertion at the timestamp of the assertion. So let's say I make this assertion and Biden is the president of the USA at the time, then that assertion should not be disputed. And if there is a dispute, it should be voted, it should be resolved as true. But now, say there's been a change, now you can make a new assertion of someone else being president of the USA. But yeah, you should always evaluate the assertion at the timestamp of that when it was made. And so that
Right.
shows up in the Oracle UI. There'll be a timestamp, so the requested time. So this is the time that you should analyze the assertion at.
Yeah, we've had this with football games, for example, where someone's actually asserted that a team has won a game before the game's ended. So for that, you have to vote for it's too early, even though
Yeah.
that team might be way ahead anyway, and they're bound to win because you can never tell exactly. You have to wait till it's actually ended.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad practice to assert those things early, and yeah, you'll get disputed.
What
Um,
what kind of projects would suit people just starting out? For example, like a hackathon project.
um, I mean, there's tons of different stuff you can do with Oracle. It's very open-ended, and it depends on what people's interests and skill levels are. Um, so it's
I think
tough
that's
to
what I took
say.
from what you said before. Just choose something that you're interested in.
Yeah, yeah, and choose something that fits your ability. And if you do like a hackathon, like build out the core parts of it, and once you're done that, then build out the pretty front end or whatever, right? Because usually you're under some pretty severe time restraints. So that's what always the approach I've kind of taken. Um, yeah, I think playing around with the example contracts in the dev quick start repo is a great place for people to get started. And yeah, maybe like deploy one of those and understand how they work. So I'm trying to find the dev quick start repo here.
Like the way you went through everything and to the contract and then go to optimistic
Yeah,
Oracle. Just playing more with that would be great.
yeah, just deploy one of these three contracts, play around with it, and then once you're comfortable, then like maybe create a new contract that's similar and you can reference how these smart contracts work, but like write one yourself that's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's a good next step.
Another thing as well is when you come to an if you get an error like what you did there and you didn't have the dollar sign. If you didn't know that you didn't need a dollar sign, where did you go for kind of
Yeah.
troubleshooting, asking for help? Did you just do
Um,
like a search on the internet, or was there specific resources that you could go and check?
Trying to find where that error was. I mean, there's kind of like I think steps you need to go through. First, I would try and read the error and understand what it means. Which is honestly like lots of errors are really hard to understand. This one was like fairly um, a pretty easy to understand error because like I ran this and I look and it says well, first of all I can see that okay the contract was deployed, so it wasn't a problem with contract deployment, right? And so now they're starting contract verification, and I see the error is invalid API key. So when they tried to verify the contract, there was an invalid API key. So I know it must be the Etherscan API key, right?
Yeah,
And it's saying it wasn't able to understand the value given, right? So that's why I go through here. I look at okay, what did I pass into Etherscan API key? Oh, okay, I forgot a dollar sign here. Um, you could definitely uh, paste this into Chat GPT, and I think
oh, ChatGPT. Okay.
Chat GPT is actually so good and so handy to developers.
The other one is Copilot, right? Use.
Yes, I've never used GitHub Copilot. That's like one that's actually meant. Oh, I don't have it in here. But yes,
Infinity says ChatGPT rocks. I've been using
yeah,
Claude,
I'll
which is
plug in
Anthropic.
here. Let's do this. Okay, so I would put in explain this error message, and then usually I do my code in.
Do you have the paid for version, or is this the free version
No,
you're
this is
using?
free.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's saying, so it'll give you like, actually explain the error and whatever.
Yeah.
Um, to resolve this issue, you should double check the API key. So
Yeah.
Etherscan API key. So it didn't catch that I missed a dollar sign on it, but it is pointing it out. Yeah, I think um, troubleshooting errors is a big part of coding. So the first thing I would try and do is understand it myself, and then you can Google it and look for like Stack Overflow. Like that's a good website for finding common errors and the fix to them. You can use ChatGPT, but I do think the important thing is to try and understand the error so that next time you do it, you can read the error and troubleshoot it yourself. Um, yeah,
Excellent. We're top of the hour now. That's gone really quick. Thanks, Lee.
yeah.
Are there any questions? I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Poker night. There you go. Yeah, we could do another one for OSNAP. We have some videos on YouTube about setting it up and stuff too, but yeah, we could do a learning session for OSNAP. I'd be up for that.
Excellent. In that case, we'll finish there. Thanks a lot. I learned quite a bit there already. So yeah, and like I said,
Yeah,
we'll put this recording on YouTube and put all the links and everything so people can get started. So thanks again, Lee.
awesome.
That was
Thanks
great.
for hosting me on.
Thank you, and thank you
Talk to you later,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Neon. Was a good session and a good attendance as well.
Indeed, yeah. So are people now going to be playing poker?
No, was poker yesterday.
Ah, okay.
We had the quiz today.
Ah, okay. Awesome. Okay, thank you, everybody, and catch you next time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye bye. Have a good night.